Hi everyone, so today I will be discussing privacy and confidentiality in accessing integrity and availability. So let's first start off with confidentiality. So confidentiality is preserving the privacy of the individual and of the company. So there are 4 basic actions that you do that must be taken to preserve the integrity of the company's information. And I will be reading off the list. So the first one is to identify and classify the information to be protected. Number 2, encrypt the information. Number 3, control access to the information. And number 4, train employees to properly handle the information. Now we'll go through each step one by one. So the first step is to identify and classify the information needed to be encrypted. So for example, in a manufacturing company, you would want to encrypt the information of your supplies and of the products that you want to give out. You also may want to encrypt like the systems because they would contain valuable information, and if you lose that information, you would have to lose money. The second step is to encrypt information. Now, encryption is one of the only ways to protect your information as it transmits on the internet. For example, a lot of accounting systems use encryption to make sure no one really accesses their data, and they use private networks to ensure that not a lot of outsiders can actually access that information. The third step is to control the access to the information. As I previously mentioned, there are types of software that could prevent outsiders from looming in, not just private networks. So there are 2 types of software, and there are a lot more, I'm sure, but these are the 2 types that were mentioned in the book, so I'm going to be mentioning it in the video. So the first software is the Information Rights Management Software, or it's called the IRM. Now this provides an additional layer of protection in your information through a digital format. So not only does this protect your information, but it also makes it so that the person accessing specifies the action so that the information isn't breached. So protecting confidentiality not only requires controls, but it also requires outbound communication, because your protection of your database and your information goes through a lot of users outside and inside an entity. So one software that could really use this is database loss prevention software, or the DLP. Now this is sort of like an antivirus program, but it works in reverse, so it blocks outgoing messages that could potentially spread around some valuable information in your software. The 4th step is training. Obviously, having employees that are 1, reliable, and number 2, competent are very hard to come by. So training is always a must, and a lot of companies train their employees to do really well and to make them know not only how to create sort of a safe environment in the office space, but also how to protect their own private information. So these things come hand in hand in protecting and continuing the confidentiality in your entity. Alright, so let's move on to protecting the privacy of personal information. Now, how to do this is through one thing, and it's through an encryption system. So what makes a good encryption system? There are 3 things that make a good encryption system. So there are 3 factors to determine a really good encryption system. Number 1 is your key length. Number 2 is the encryption algorithm, and number 3 is the policies that rule over the cryptographic keys. There are also other things you can do to protect your private information. You have VPN, which are virtual private networks. You have digital signatures and digital certificates just to authenticate and verify that it's actually you who is accessing and giving away your information. Now we'll move on to the second part of the video, which is processing integrity and availability controls. So these are 2 trust service framework principles. Now what these mean is they basically are the foundation of what a trust service framework is. So processing integrity is the principle that information that you give out and information that comes in the company is valid, it is accurate, complete, timely, and it's basically a reliable system. And there are 3 different stages that uses 3 different controls. So first you have the input stage, where your data is sort of invalid, it's not that reliable, and the controls that you want to do is you can have designs, cancellations, storage of documents, and things like that that could make sure that that information that you put in does become reliable. And the second step is processing, and that is sort of the stage where the risks are that the data that you are inputting have errors and that it's stored incorrectly. So what you want to do is to make sure you sort of match to the data that you're putting in and the data that you're putting out to make sure that it's basically correct. You can label your files. You could do batch totals, cross-footing, and zero balance tests. And the last stage is, of course, your output. So the risk of that is you're using the incorrect reports that are not only inaccurate, but they are sort of unreliable, and you also have the risk that you could completely lose them or they could be altered by someone. So what you want to do to control this is to make sure you review and there are reconciliations. You make sure that you have really good encryption and access controls to prevent any tampering of some sort, and things like that that could help your whole process stage of processing integrity good. Then we move on to availability. Now the goal of availability is to minimize the risk of system downtime. Now system downtime is what happens when your system goes down through crash or bugs or something of some sort, and how long would it take to get the system up and running again. Now the two ways to prevent this from happening are just to cut that system downtime time a bit shorter is through two things, and that is they're both backup plans. Now there is DRP and BCP. Now DRP is a disaster recovery plan. This plan outlines the procedures of what an IT person or what an IT department can do in the event that the data center is destroyed in an act of natural disaster or terrorism. A BCP is a business continuity plan. And a BCP is sort of the last resort where an act of terrorism or natural calamity destroys not only the data center, but the entire headquarters. So a BCP outlines exactly what to do with the processes and the IT in the event that something like that does happen. And the last stage of this whole topic is the topic of virtualization. Of course, living in a digital age, there is so much we can do and so much more backup, but that also includes a lot more risks. Now, as our generation evolves and as we go on through time, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more pure controls and better controls as of breach and data privacy. But cloud computing is a huge thing. Everyone is using Google Drive, everyone's using the iCloud to store and back up their photos, their files, videos, and all sorts of things. So hopefully this will be utilized well in the accounting world, and obviously as a future CPA I want to ensure that my role in the future will contribute to this widening society, that one day our data privacy will be something of importance. I know now that not everyone really values their privacy that much online anymore, but in the future I hope that people will be more cautious, and this will reflect well on both people and business entities. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.